Eli 5. Why do records run specifically with 33 revolutions per minute or 45 revolutions per minute, and very early records ran with 78 revolutions per minute, which is the sum of 33 and 45? Who decided 78 was the right amount of RPM, and why split is it the sum of the other two speeds? 78 being a sum is pure coincidence. Here is the breakdown on the speeds for Victrola. The first iteration of the vinyl record player found its speed somewhat by accident. Since the original phonograph machines were hand-cranked, there was a push among inventors from the early years of widespread use to find an automatic solution to spinning the record. Although there are differing accounts as to exactly how the process unfolded, the end result was a machine that turned records at 78 revolutions per minute. As the new machine became more popular, its limitations became only more apparent. Spinning the disc record at 78 revolutions per minute, also known as revolutions or rotations per minute, means that a 12-inch disc can only hold between 4 and 5 minutes of music. This meant that classical music and popular Broadway tunes could not be played in their entirety without flipping or changing discs. As a result, there developed over the following decades a race to discover and popularize a slower spinning machine. The challenge was that records could only be spun so slowly before there occurred a drop in audio quality. The question then became settling on the right balance between the machine being fast enough to sound good but slow enough to store more music on the disc. The result was two competing speeds, 45 revolutions per minute and 33 1/3 revolutions per minute. Since there was now a situation where three different speeds were present in the market, it became necessary to distinguish between them, leading to the formats we currently have today. Records today can be found in the following formats, designated by their speed. 78s, primarily records produced before 1955. 45s, primarily used for 7 discs carrying singles or EPs. 33 1/3, primarily used for long-format LPs, albums. Others, 16 and 8, rarely used but occasionally for spoken word recordings. 78. Although stories about the development of the first automatic phonograph machine tend to differ, it is generally accepted that the speed was an accident. Likely because the motor placed inside the machine happened to operate at a speed of 78 revolutions per minute, phonographs were standardized at that rate, and recordings were optimized to that speed. Early records were made of shellac, a wax material that predated the later vinyl versions. Sizes were generally 10 or 12. Read more in our related blog post about how a vinyl record is made. The fact that each side of a disc was only able to carry between 3 and 5 minutes of music created an obvious limitation that eventually led to the demise of the 78. By 1955, production had all but ceased in this format, to be replaced by longer formats. While 78s did continue to be pressed in isolated instances, today they are mainly to be found only in antique form. 45. By the mid-1940s, competition sprung up between longer formats looking to displace the 78. One of these longer formats was the 45. Although the slower spin speed meant that more music could be recorded onto a 12-disc, the 45 became the format of choice for singles and EP, extended play, releases. Artists would release 7 45s carrying a signature tune to be played either on the radio or in jukeboxes, and this became its primary use. It's somewhat rare to find full LPs released in 45, but they do exist in some cases. There are groups of audiophiles who swear that the 45 brings with it superior sound quality in comparison to the slower 33 1/3. As a result, some artists will put out special releases of their albums in 45 formats. A general rule, however, is that the 45 is primarily the domain of the single and the EP. 33 1/3. The third common format for vinyl records is the 33 1/3. After its release in the 1940s, around the same time as the 45, the 33 1/3 quickly became the format of choice for LP, or long-playing, full album, pressings. Since the runtime per side for a 12-disc usually comes to around 22 minutes, the 33 1/3 quickly became the ideal choice for classical music and Broadway tunes that the 78 and 45 couldn't support so readily. As the LP became more popular among recording artists, so too did the 33 1/3 format. Today, almost all vinyl records that you will encounter in record stores and large commercial retailers are 12 33 1/3 pressings. As the standard for album releases and record companies, the 33 1/3 became ubiquitous after the 1950s, and if you encounter a vinyl turntable that doesn't have an adjustable speed switch, it's most likely fixed to this format. Others, 16 and 8. It is possible that in rare cases you may encounter records that are designed to be played in a format other than 78, 45, or 33 and 1/3. 16 and 8 revolutions per minute formats have been used in some instances for spoken word recordings, since they're capable of holding additional material. However, a loss of audio quality does occur with these formats, so it is almost unheard of to find 16 or 8 records with songs and music on them. It is also worth noting that many of today's turntables are unable to play at speeds slower than 33 and 1/3. If you own a 16 or 8 record and are looking for a player, it is recommended that you check specifically to find one that is capable of playing in these formats. Removed. Records started out with more than one speed. Several manufacturers tried to have unique speeds that would require records that only they sold. Much like printers and razors today, but RCA Victor quickly dominated the market with their 78 revolutions per minute design because in addition to having their own branded music, they allowed others to also make records for that speed. That speed was chosen because of limitations of the technology. The first record players, gramophones, were spring-powered and had only the big tuba-shaped horn to provide amplification of the signal. That meant to be allowed, you had to have a track that moved the needle a lot. This takes up more space on the disc, reducing the maximum length of audio you could capture. And, at the same time, the smaller the wiggles in the record you can create, the better the audio quality, a factor which pushes towards faster speeds. The creators assumed that opera and classical works would be the highest demand, so they created a record size and speed that would hold the sort of long tracks found in those genres. A similar story exists behind the creation of the modern CD. However, popular music turned out to be the big winner in sales. The existing standard could hold an entire album of music. But many creators of pop music had come from music hall and vaudeville backgrounds, where songs were created more individually. In order to sell those individual songs, the single was created. Once reliable electric motors with very consistent speed and electrical amplification was available, tracks could be cut more narrow to take up less disk space. The new technology allowed for a smaller, slower turning disc to hold just as much audio as the old 78s. Record player makers knew that while people would happily buy into the new, better sounding record tech, there was still a huge base of 78s out there. To cope with that, they created players that played at 33 or 78 using a gear or moving a belt to a different pulley. A bit later, 45 was added by adding another pulley. Today, record players typically change speeds using electronic speed control to adjust the motor speed directly. The fact that 78 equals 45 plus 33 is pure coincidence, and only really works if you ignore that vinyl albums run at 33 and 1/3 RPM, not 33. As for who decides on the speed, engineers. The general rule of thumb for analog music formats is the faster the speed, the better the quality. That's true for tapes, wires, discs, cylinders, etc. Of course, faster speed also means lower capacity. So it's up to the engineers that come up with the format to find the lowest possible speed at which the quality is still satisfactory, which depends on a huge number of factors, like the medium itself, recording methods, playback technology, customer expectations and so on. Columbia decided 33 and 1/3 RPM was the sweet spot for their records, RCA Victor decided on 45 RPM. Although, with that said, it's also very likely that RCA just deliberately wanted to make their format incompatible with early 33 RPM players, which didn't have speed select yet. Techmoan has a great video about record formats. His channel is also an amazing source for anything you could ever want to know about audio formats. Removed. Isn't that top answer just saying all of these different speeds exist in a very long walk of text that doesn't even address the question? The only thing addressing the question is the guy saying it was a coincidence which was unsighted. Check out Techmoan on YouTube. Here's a 40 minutes video about vinyl playing speeds and how they developed. If you're interested in some kind of obscure audio format or audio device, he probably has made a video about it. One of my favorite channels on YouTube. So little story, I bought a Fleetwood Mac record, brand new greatest hits collection. I listened to this thing for 2 years trying to figure out if I had gotten some special edition where everything was sang by Lindsey Buckingham or something because all the songs were really deep voiced and a bit slower than you usually hear them. Anyways, one day I'm listening to it and my wife is looking at the sleeve and she's like, "Do you have the record player at 45 revolutions per minute?" I'm like, "No, it's a regular sized record, it's supposed to be at 33 revolutions per minute." She points to a small 45 revolutions per minute label on the sleeve. I switch the record player and boom, it sounds normal. Not gonna lie though, I kinda liked Stevie Nicks at 33 revolutions per minute lol. TL, doctor, listen to what I thought was a 33 revolutions per minute record for years when it was a 45. If it's spinning at the same constant angular velocity but the needle is also moving inward as it plays, won't it have to slow down, speed up, less more RPM, to maintain the same linear speed, or is the data recorded more sparsely as you draw closer to the center?